Okay, at this time, I'll call the Budget Committee meeting to order and ask Angelo to call the roll, please.
Cole. Hannum. Lewis. Michelle.
Here.
Moon.
Procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
Now I'll ask if there's any public input on items on the agenda. Seeing none, item D, minutes. The minutes that need approval are in your packet, and they're from the August 10th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll declare the motion passed. Item E1A, General County Animal Control, $11,912.21. Yes.
I move items F1A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, sir.
Okay, that item E1A, B, C.
D, E, F, and G. All items that we increase.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
On item G on the Motorola lease,
Randy, will
I'm
you
having
explain
trouble
that?
understanding that. If you could explain that for me, I'd appreciate it.
On this item, it is the original appropriation comes out of the sheriff's budget to pay for the lease. We failed to include on the debt service side in 151, or 131, not 151, we failed to add that transfer both as revenue and the expense to actually pay the lease in the debt service fund. So this is all of our debt, including capitalized leases, needs to come out of the debt service fund. So you have the expense in the general fund, and that needs to be a transfer out of the general fund. Then you ought to have a revenue over in the debt service fund showing the transfer in, and then the actual lease payment needs to come out of the debt service fund, not the general county. Well, it was initially, and that's what we're trying to correct here.
Any other discussion or questions? I'll ask for roll call vote, please.
Hannum.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now moving on to transfers. E2A, General County Transfer 164,504, putting Motorola lease in the correct account.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion on that? I'll ask for roll call vote, please.
Hannum.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item E2B, General County Elections, $2,836 to correct a salary supplement from the state. Randy, will you explain that?
The county receives from the state of Tennessee a supplement of $18,000, and we failed to budget the full amount. We only had some $15,000 and change in there, and so this would be an additional revenue that we get that we would end up being eligible to have the money to appropriate it if the registrar attains the certification.
Do I have a motion? Have a motion, do I have a second? Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for roll call vote, please.
Hannum,
Yes.
Lewis, Mitchell,
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now moving on to grant applications. E3A, Library, Tennessee Reconnect Community Grant from the State of Higher Education Commission. Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Hannum,
Yes.
Lewis, Mitchell,
Yes.
Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
E3B, Register of Deeds, Tennessee State Library and Archives. There's no match. This is for information only. So this is does not warrant a vote on this. Item F, discussion, possible action, other post-employment benefits, trust presentation. Randy?
We're required by Governmental Accounting Standards Board to report the value of our other post-employment benefit obligations. And every other year, we have that evaluation done by a third party. USI is the entity that we contract with to provide that assessment for us. And Matthew Cross is here tonight to brief you all, and then he's available for any questions. So, Matthew, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vineyard, and he did an excellent job of summing up the purpose of this report. GASB statement number 45 is the accounting standard which governs the treatment of other post-employment benefits, which again is essentially everything besides your pension benefits. So medical, life insurance, disability, dental, vision, everything but pension is covered under this. You have before you a page of the financial statement disclosure, which is the page required by the auditors and to be in compliance with GASB 45. A couple of numbers that I want to highlight for you is under letter A, number 8. That's the net OPEB obligation. Under GASB 45, that is the liability that has always been reported by Blount County. That number is $2.729 million for fiscal year ending 6/30/2015. When we met with Mr. Vineyard and his team this year, we discussed the impending changes to other post-employment benefit accounting with the new statements GASB 74 and 75. Those statements will be effective for fiscal years 2017 and 2018. And it's a very different style method for valuing the worth of these benefits. If you look under letter B on the same page, we list the actuarial accrued liability for your plan. And you'll see that that number is $20,061,000. If we were to switch to the new standards today, that would be the number that Blount County government would book instead of the $2.7 million. So it's almost a $17 million increase due simply to this new method. This mirrors the changes you all may already be familiar with under GASB 67 and 68 concerning pension benefits. But OPEB benefits historically have followed behind other post-employment benefits and employed the same methodology. So we discussed with Mr. Vineyard and his team both just the reality of this new method and whether or not that may be a concern to you all, as well as any potential solutions to deal with the scale of this change. The main thing that you can do as a public entity in the state of Tennessee is create what we call an OPEB trust. And an OPEB trust is similar to a pension plan. You register it with the state government, and you set aside assets in anticipation of cash outflows tied to your OPEB benefits. And what that allows you to do is decrease your liability because you treat it essentially now like a pension plan. That $20 million figure that you would be forced to show under GASB 75 is built on every cash flow we anticipate under your current plan, which is a little over $59 million in total outflow for every employee currently in your service. Now, we project that out over a tremendous time frame, 100 years. So the rate at which we discount that liability back is forced to be a current rate under GASB. If you have a trust, then it becomes dependent on both the level of funded status as well as the strategy the county were to employ as far as investing those assets. If you have a targeted goal above a current rate, which is easy in today's environment, you dramatically impact your liability, because now we have 100 years of cash flows that we're bringing back at a higher rate, which discounts that more aggressively. That's the accounting benefit. Of course, an economic benefit exists because you're now able to utilize investment choices that are typically not available to a public entity. It's exactly like a pension plan. You can use mutual funds or exchange-traded funds, and the goal is to get an economic rate of return over and above what you'd otherwise get. Again, with the goal in mind of being, we decrease the overall cost of the system. The reason these things are not as popular and there's not as much information about it is because OPEB benefits have historically been considered immaterial. It was only 2007, 2008 that we even had to measure these liabilities, and that's the existence of 45. With the change, really, in the pension landscape and accounting and actuarial methods, everyone's concerned much more with financial and accounting styles that say, where are we today? And as a virtue of that, we have a lot of interest and focus on evaluating OPEB trusts in the state today. Many governmental entities are evaluating it as a potential solution, again, for the purposes of protecting these plans and the benefits and making them more economical and mitigating the impact of the new accounting standards. So that was the heart and soul of what we discussed. It's not just the presentation of results as they are, because this is the last evaluation of this type that the county will ever receive. The next evaluation, which will be performed for fiscal years 17 and 18, will be under the new standards. So it's only 2 more years of seeing the numbers as they are now, and then they'll simply go away. So any questions about any of those ideas now? And of course, the information's on the screen. I apologize for its size. We have pages that we can make available. We have copies, or they'll be available online tomorrow as well.
Key thing is the entire report will be online tomorrow on our website. And Matthew, as he said, is only focusing on this one page right now because I think it's the most beneficial information to you. The rest of the report, probably another 30 some odd pages, breaks it down by employee group, distinguishing the school system from general county, and then distinguishes retirees from active participants in our plan. Key point, there is, in addition to these GASB pronouncements, and I apologize for the acronyms, GASB stands for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They're kind of the authority that sets guidance for how we're supposed to account for our activities. And Matthew made reference to the fact that pension reform has similar guidance from GASB. Those are numbers 67 and 8, I believe.
Correct.
And we're impacted on that front because we're relying, since we participate in the state retirement system, the state has to provide us with some information for reporting purposes. And all of that is changing. So there's a lot of new stuff that the citizenry, as well as the staff, as well as the elected membership, has got to get familiar with. And I think the essence of all these new pronouncements is to make sure that the government is adequately defining the liabilities to the degree there are any, as well as the assets to the degree there are any, and that is fairly presented on our financial statements, not just in Blount County, but in every county in the state of Tennessee. The other way that you might look at what Matthew's presented is because of the pension reform and the emphasis that'll be in the audit that you will receive this year when the state finishes their work, is OPEB should be looked at hand in glove with the pension retirement. It's not supposed, because those are our employees that are receiving the retirement benefit. They're also our employees that have the costs associated with the post-retirement benefit. Is that a reasonable way to
very
look
well
at
said.
it? You don't need to have one over here and one over here and look at them separately. They should be viewed as one and the same. And then that would go back to what the HR committee does in the way of benefits and what they recommend and the policy decisions associated with that. There would be some financial consequence here in addition to what claims are paid out. I hope I didn't thoroughly confuse everybody.
Is there any questions for Randy or for Matthew?
Let me ask Matthew one. Would you tell the group how many counties in the state maybe set aside a trust fund to account for these activities?
Well, we work with a number of public entities across the state, and counties are slower to react. So we have 2 that currently have a trust that we know of that we work with. Okay. We found many more municipalities, typically utilities, have adopted trusts. Again, with the benefit of mitigating this accounting impact and to satisfy hopefully an emotional or an overall goal for true financial gain. So we have over 10 public entities in the state that are at some stage of establishing a trust, and many of those have only begun this process in the past year, because really these GASB changes.
And is it fair to say that the way that Blount County handles these matters right now is on a cash basis?
That's correct. It's what we call a pay-as-you-go model. There's no obligation to fund except for as needed, which is consistent with the original design of GASB and the treatment of OPEB. Of course, the new standards are designed and pushed towards the pre-funding of benefits because it's a very different method, which you can see from the change of a $2.7 million liability to a $20 million.
So right now, and correct me if I misspeak, Matthew, but right now the way Blount County is financing this liability is when we receive an estimate of what the cost is going to be for the post-retirement benefits annually, we budget that amount and then we would pay that amount out. So there is no provision for the future. It's all on a pay-as-you-go, as needed, as funded basis.
Correct. Yeah, your typical cash flow is about $1.5 million a year today. And again,
that's on line 5 under A.
That's correct. And if we project it out for every current employee covered under your OPEB plan, that will be about $59.6 million in total cash flow that this plan will experience until every employee is no longer covered under the OPEB plan, meaning they are retired.
So how would city or county governments, other than a trust fund being established, if that option weren't chosen, how would any local government, whether they be city or county, help control these costs if they didn't set aside money in a trust?
Well, your true costs, stepping aside from the accounting, are largely controlled by the provisions of your plan. So your medical plan, your dental, your life insurance, all of those dictate your costs, and whether or not you have the ability to amend those plans is dictated by the language of your plan design and the SPD distributed to your employees. So if you have the right to change those provisions, of course, that would have a direct impact on the cost. If you do not have the ability in the plan document to change it, then potentially you don't have a direct way to impact your costs. Because what we've seen in the past is where public governments have attempted to change it, that's caused legal action to be taken on part of employees to protect those benefits as they were originally promised as terms of their hire.
I'm just curious, what would some of those attempts be by those governments that have been challenged?
Well, in the state of Tennessee, we have not had that happen yet.
Okay.
So we have had it's the Shelby County decision, which affected pension benefits.
Right.
And of course, that essentially ruled that a public employee's benefits, it protected a number of parts of the pension plan. They cannot be changed after an employee is hired under those terms. The pension legislation that the Tennessee government passed last year allowed that public entities could adopt language that anyone hired after July 1st of last year could have pension benefits changed going forward. It's unclear if that allowed public entities the ability to respond further back from that. It hasn't been tested. You know, in the past, Tennessee has been very protective of public employee benefits, but we've seen many changes recently to bring Tennessee to be more similar to neighboring states, which are less protective of public benefits. So the simple answer is it would come down to a decision of the courts, and we don't have a precedent that is directly applicable to other post-employment benefits.
All right. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if one way to control this cost in the absence of a trust would be to say at some date in the future, those benefits might not be offered to employees. Is that a way to lessen the liability?
The liability as it's represented here is only for your currently employed individuals.
Okay.
The way that we typically advise our public clients is to make changes only for those individuals who would be hired in the future.
Right.
And all of our valuations are what we call a closed valuation. So we're already essentially assuming you're never going to hire someone again. So if you made a change as a government that we will no longer offer OPEB for anyone hired after this date, that would have no impact on your current liability.
It just keeps it from growing.
Correct.
Okay.
It's like freezing pension.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
And these numbers, as Matthew said, will be reflected in our annual audit that the Comptroller's Office will be doing. They've already supplied that information to the auditors.
When you develop a trust, what percentage of your, how many years do you put into that trust? I mean, how when you develop a trust, you're going to have a number where you want that trust to be. What's the average number of years that you would have in that trust to cover your
Full liability.
your liability?
There are a couple ways to answer that. Typically what we will do is we would work both towards satisfying the accounting standards in the most favorable way, so there are accounting constraints, and then also what are the economic goals and realities of the public entity. What can they realistically fund on an annual basis? As a maximum time frame to fully fund a trust, we start with 30 years, and then we will scale it from there to a shorter period of time as varying goals are of different import to the public entity. The availability of cash, how much liability has been accrued under GASB 45, because that essentially forms an accounting ceiling without realizing additional expense. But among our clients, we've had the most aggressive be 7 years to be fully funded, and others are adopting the maximum of 30 years to get the full accounting benefit with a minimal economic impact to their operational cash flow. To give you all a sense of scale, to fully fund under an accounting basis for 45, Blount County would need to fund approximately $155,000 a year into a trust to be fully funded under GASB 45. Of course, that's a little over 10% of what you're already paying now as true cash flow, where you're paying premiums and benefits tied to OPEB.
Commissioner?
So it's really two issues. One is how to control the costs going forward on the liability side. The other, which is, I guess, it's basically a reserve account, is it not? To fund current liabilities that would happen, I guess, either in this year or so many years to come. And you're saying that we need to fund, we need in the reserve or in the trust fund, how many years worth of liabilities?
It would be 30 years of approximately $150,000 in cash flow, or if the county were to fully fund this year, it'd be approximately $15 million in assets to fully offset every cash flow ever anticipated with your OPEB.
Pretty sure that won't happen. Thank you.
I do want to make one clarification. A reserve account, of course, would be set up by this body and can be changed in theory in the future. A trust must be registered with the state, and any assets that move into that trust cannot come back out except for the benefit of the OPEB plan. And GASB 74 and 75 will only count assets in a registered trust, not those in a reserve account.
Is there any other questions for Matthew or for Randy? Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
Item F2, PCI compliance statement. This is information security policy. Randy, will you present this, please?
Yes, I think the date was October 1st, where for our activities that we allow the use of credit cards, whether they be at the animal center, whether they be at the library, whether they be in the trustee's office, there are certain standards that we're to adhere to. We had an organization called Net3 look at that, and it's called PCI compliance statement. It starts on page 107 in your packet. And basically they've said that we meet the requirements, at least at this juncture, of meeting those standards. And the standards are set by the credit card issuers. And basically what it boils down to, are we adequately securitizing the credit card data? And we're not hosting any of that data, and we don't want to host any of that data in our system. So we, by and large, are using third parties to host that data. And that's the essence of that report. But we wanted to make sure that you were aware that the county is at least meeting that requirement right now. And that is just for information only. And this will go on to the full commission as well.
Is there any questions for Randy on that? Item F3, fiscal year 15-16 budget approval letter from the state. Randy, will you explain that?
Yes. Each year we have to submit our budget to the comptroller's office. Each year they send us a letter telling us that they have received it and they will comment on that. I've included that letter in this packet for this body. It does not require any action. We have been asked to make sure that each commissioner gets a personal copy of this. It's all about accountability. They want to make sure that commissioners are making decisions, and they want the commission to know the consequences of those decisions. The only condition, and that's at the bottom of page 2, I think, where they've asked, there was a new requirement this year that we had to submit budget on a cash basis, and they have made a comment in there about one of the school funds that they want to make sure that you all are adequately monitoring and are informed about. Troy's here if you've got any specific questions, but it's a small fund, and I think Troy made a provision to put enough money over there that that fund activities could live off of it. We didn't present a monthly cash flow budget, I think, on that particular fund, but if you've got any questions about that, he can address those. But basically, they've accepted our budget, and they've said that you've adopted a tax rate that'll adequately fund the year's worth of activities for the county.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send that letter forward to the commission and place it in the packet.
I have a motion to send the letter forward to the commission in the packet. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Any other discussion on that? Item G, finance reports, that's information only. I'll now ask if there's any input on items not on the agenda. Seeing none. Tom?
I'm Tom Faulkner, Vice President of Appalachian Bear Rescue, and I come before you to ask you to participate in a cost-sharing plan with City of Townsend and Appalachian Bear Rescue to purchase bear-proof garbage containers for the picnic areas along 321 from Wallen up into Townsend. The sites are already prepared, and TWRA is going to install those, but we're having so much bear activity, all these containers are getting a lot of use and abuse, and right now all they have is open 50-gallon garbage cans. So if you've seen today's newspaper, why you'll see that bears are getting mighty hungry when they're eating the fenders off of automobiles. So to see fried chicken boxes in the top of a 50-gallon open container is something that's going to be a prime example for food right there. And we tell everybody at our organization, a fed bear is a dead bear. So if you can help us out with that, the TWRA will install them at no cost, but the purchase price is $1,145 each, plus freight on those. And we're asking, Townsend has already kicked in $2,000 for us, and we'll pay the difference, whatever. But if you can help us with $2,000, that's approximately a third of the cost right there. So that's what we're asking for to help us out. The bears are going to be crossing up 321, which is pretty busy, and those picnic areas get a lot of use. So there's a lot of trash, and the Apple Valley told me last Wednesday that they're having bears virtually every night, which is right straight across the road from the picnic areas in Townsend right there. So they're having bears every night in their dumpsters, and they're trying to change companies just to be able to get a bear-proof garbage container, dumpsters that is. But these are all 2 petition ones. They'll hold a 50-gallon barrel equivalent in each side, and so they will be installed shortly. So we're just hoping that you'd be able to help us with that and see that that's a need to stop the bears from crossing 321 and coming into these picnic areas, which are heavily used. Be a 1/3 cost share.
I know this goes not without asking questions, but Tom, who takes on the responsibility of emptying those?
Right now, it's sort of co-op between TDOT and City of Townsend. And just whoever comes by, more or less, at the time when their trucks are in the area, but they're emptied. But these would be locked. They can't be opened in any other way other than the lock on the back side. Put food in on the front side, but you got to reach in to undo a latch to ever open the top to put your garbage in. But then to get it out, it's off the back side. It folds down. So I've got a picture of it, and a picture of the open 50-gallon barrel to show you what the difference is. If you
All right, thank you, Tom.
okay.
Any other input? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.